What is up, YouTube? Welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about the gateway of the mind. It's a reference to a creepypasta made way back in the day. Shout out to anyone coming from my TikTok channel. That's like my main source of social media, so big thank you to you guys. Okay, so what is the gateway of the mind? So in 1983, a team of scientists decided to do an extreme experiment where they would take away all of the person's senses. They theorized that when humans have all of their senses taken away, they can perceive the presence of God. An elderly man with nothing left to live was the only volunteer they had, so he went through a complex surgery to sever all of his senses. This old man did retain muscular function, but he had no way of really communicating. He could speak, but he couldn't hear. After 4 days, the man heard voices in his head. The scientists paid no attention to him, and they thought he was undergoing psychosis. Things got really weird 2 days later. He claimed he could hear his dead wife speaking to him, and he could also communicate back to her. The scientists were getting a little interested at this point, but they weren't interested until he started naming their dead relatives. He even shared personal info about the scientists that only their dead parents or dead spouses would even know. A lot of the scientists actually ended up leaving the study because they were way too freaked out by this. Soon, all of these voices became way too much for the man, and he begged to be put on sedatives so they could sleep peacefully and not hear any voices in his head. He was given sedatives, but they were only working for about 3 days until he started having night terrors and the deceased started communicating with him again. Not even 24 hours later, the subject started to scream and claw at his non-functional eyes. The subject was going crazy at this point, and he said that the dead were talking about no forgiveness and no heaven and how the world is going to end. At this point, the subject was begging to be killed, but the scientists refused. They thought they were too close to finding the connection between him and God. 24 hours later, the subject couldn't even form coherent sentences. The subject started off biting chunks of flesh off of his arm, and he had to be restrained in order for him to not kill himself. For 2 weeks, he was manually fed and rehydrated. He was also blankly staring at the ceiling for these 2 weeks with teardrops running down his non-functional eyes. Despite having non-functional eyes, he managed to turn to one of the scientists in the perfect line of sight. Maintaining this focused eye contact, he said, "I have spoken with God and he has abandoned us," and all of his vitals ceased. There was no apparent cause of death. With all this being said, there is some footage that people claim is from the Gateway of the Mind experiment, and I'm going to play that right now.
Allahu Akbar.